when her gentle act of kindness unveils a powerful secret. The grand ballroom of the hotel shimmered under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers, the light casting fractured rainbows on polished marble floors. The hum of applause echoed faintly through the cavernous space as Dr. Emily Roberts stood alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows, the buzzing crowd a vibrant and distant blur behind her. Outside, the city lights of New York flickered like a constellation of hope and heartbreak. Her chestnut hair was pulled back, strands loose against her temple, a small glint catching the light, the worn silver of her stethoscope resting against her neck beneath her perfectly tailored blouse and jeans. In her hands, she clutched a slender glass of water, fingertips trembling, the coolness a stark contrast to the fire burning quietly inside. Across the room, the murmur of voices animated the gala, laughter bubbling like a river in full flood. Yet for Emily, it felt like standing beneath a waterfall of silence, entirely adrift. Suddenly, a voice sliced through the murmur, cruel and sharp as broken glass. "Well, well, if it isn't the vet girl," came the sneer, mocking tone loud enough to pull every gaze. Heads turned, eyes sharp and judgmental. The crowd closed in like a tightening noose. Emily's ex-boyfriend stepped forward, his tailored suit as perfect as the venom in his words. "Still playing doctor to those stray dogs, Emily? Didn't think you had the brains or the guts for anything more." The room dimmed imperceptibly as the words landed, a collective breath held in the weight of humiliation. Emily's cheeks flushed a raw crimson, heat crawling like wildfire beneath her skin. Her grip on the glass tightened, knuckles whitening. "That's enough," she whispered, voice steadier than she felt, meeting his gaze with a fierce flicker of defiance despite the tremor in her chest. But the crowd began to stir, whispers like ripples across a still pond. An icy chill traced her spine as she felt the isolation creeping in, eyes filled not with empathy, but with pity or scorn. The polished tiles beneath her feet felt suddenly slippery, untrustworthy. Buddy, her faithful dog waiting just outside the grand doors, was a sharp and distant thought, a beacon of warmth that seemed unreachable under the weight of this public unraveling. Emily's breath hitched, her pulse pounding loud enough to drown the murmurs around her. The glint of the rose lapel pin she wore, a symbol of love and danger, caught the light, a fragile beacon in the tide of shadows washing over her. The ex-boyfriend's smirk deepened. "Maybe it's time you admit you don't belong here." The sting of rejection wrapped itself like a cold shroud around her shoulders. Yet beneath the pain, something flickered, a hidden ember of strength, a spark untouched by the glare of the crowd. Without another word, Emily turned away, the heavy velvet curtains brushing against her back as she stepped toward freedom and uncertainty. The soft click of her heels against marble echoed like a heartbeat, steady and unyielding. Outside, the city's restless heartbeat awaited, lights shimmering in promise and peril. Her stethoscope swung gently, catching the lightan emblem of dedication, hope, and the quiet battles fought in the margins of a turbulent world. The door to the gala closed behind her with a soft thud, sealing away the judgment and jeers, leaving only the lingering warmth of unseen possibilities and the first breath of a journey that would demand everything she never knew she had. The soft rustle of city wind mingled with the distant siren's song, setting the stage for the collision of worlds yet to come. The night held its breath with her. Emily closed the clinic door behind her with a slow, deliberate motion, the soft thud muffled by the evening hum of the city streets outside. The muted glow of her office lights spilled onto the empty sidewalk, a stark contrast to the bright brilliance and cold judgment she'd left behind at the gala. The sharp crack of heels against the tiled floor long ago faded into the city's distant noises, a mosaic of honking taxis, murmuring passers-by, and the faint whine of sirens. Yet, inside the quiet corollary of her little clinic, a tempest gathered beneath the calm surface. She stood for a long moment by the window, watching shadows gather, stretched long by the fading light. Her reflection hovered ghost-like in the glass, the lab coat draped silently over her frame, chestnut hair pulled back loosely, eyes veiled by an invisible weight. In her hands, the worn stethoscope lay like a talisman, cool and familiar, but less potent tonight. The echo of the ex-boyfriend's scornful words haunted the empty room. Not harsh or loud by themselves, but when replayed in the solitary silence, each syllable became sharper, a blade slicing through fragile confidence. Just moments ago, she had been the object of a cruel spectacle, stripped bare of the self-assurance she had meticulously constructed. "Maybe you never belonged here," she whispered to the empty room, not quite a question but a bitter sigh. The sting of humiliation settled like cold ash, spreading quietly beneath her skin. Her gaze fell to the scattered veterinary charts and the clipboard abandoned on the counter, symbols of a life where she was valued, needed. Yet the duality lived starkly, the healer and the rejected, fighting for space within one fragile heart. Emily sank onto a chair, the upholstery worn, the fabric soft where tired hands had grasped in hope. She tucked a weary hand beneath her chin, eyes narrowing against the haze of self-doubt. Was she enough? Could she protect this haven she'd built, or was she destined to be nothing more than an outsider admired from afar, but never truly seen? A faint noise stirred at the door, the familiar soft tap of nails on tile. Buddy, the stray she had taken in months before, nosed his way in, eyes bright and utterly fearless. His presence was a balm, the purest form of acceptance, unqualified and fierce. Emily forced a small, fragile smile, the corners of her mouth trembling as she reached down to stroke his head. The stray's collar jingled softly, a delicate reminder of loyalty and belonging she so desperately craved. Yet, beneath the warmth, a flicker of unease remained. Her world was shifting, colliding with something unpredictable and dangerous, the promise of love, and the peril it often entailed. Outside, the city lights shimmered, neon hues bleeding through the dusk as if mirroring the contradictions within her own soul, hope tangled with fear, strength shadowed by vulnerability. Inhaling deeply, Emily lifted her stethoscope and pressed it to her chest, listening not to the rhythms of the animals she cared for, but to the erratic beating of her own heart, wild, unyielding, and stubbornly alive. The night whispered secrets through the cracked open window, the soft rustle of leaves a lullaby for wounds both spoken and silent. And as Emily sat with Buddy at her feet, a faint spark stirred beneath the surface of her despair, a hint of courage, fragile but unextinguished, calling her toward the uncertain dawn. The city night crept silently as a shallow glow from the clinic's windows spilled onto the cracked concrete sidewalk. Emily stood at the threshold, breath visible in the crisp air, her heart caught between the ache of rejection and an ember of stubborn hope flickering beneath the smoke of despair. Behind her, the muted hum of the empty clinic seemed a fragile cocoon, sheltering her from a world that had just stripped her bare. Her fingers grazed the worn stethoscope hanging around her neck, a symbol of relentless dedication, a comforting weight against the isolation pressing in. The soft leather of her lab coat rustled with the gentle breeze, pockets heavy with time-worn memories and unspoken promises. A sudden rustle drew her gaze downward. There, on the cold stone step, lay a small form, a battered stray dog, its coat matted and eyes trembling with fear. The creature looked up with cautious hope, a scarred soul mirroring her own. Emily's breath caught. The faint whimper was a fragile plea threading through the night's silence. She knelt slowly, hands steady despite the turmoil swirling inside. Her fingers brushed gently over the dog's injured leg, heart tightening with a fierce, protective instinct. The stray's bird's soft collar, weathered and frayed, hung Lucilian emblem of loyalty worn yet unbroken. It was a silent testament, like the stethoscope, to survival against odds, to bonds formed and tested in the shadows. As Emily reached for a threadbare blanket, wrapping the trembling animal with whispered reassurances. The distant city lights painted streaks of molten gold across the uneven pavement. Somewhere in the distance, the faint scent of roses mingled with the crisp night air, a haunting symbol intertwined with the promise of dangerous beauty, love's sharp edges glistening in the dark. The weight of the night throbbed against Emily's chest, each soft breath a steady pulse of resilience. This small life, frail and courageous, became a mirror reflecting wounds and hopes alike. In the quiet intimacy of that moment, the flicker of her determination ignited, burning softly against the cold embrace of solitude. She rose, cradling the stray close as the city exhaled around Tama, a symphony of whispers and distant sirens playing beneath a vast, waiting sky. The instinct to care, to protect, to heal surged for the first time since the gala's bitter sting, threading her fractured spirit with threads of purpose. The first step toward change was a quiet one, measured and fearless, a gentle reclamation of strength hidden deep within her vulnerability. And as the night's shadows lengthened, Emily knew the road ahead was uncertain and fraught. Yet by the side of a small, wounded creature, she found a light, a call to journey beyond pain toward something unknown and fierce. The camera lingered on the pair against the vast urban canvas, their silhouettes etched in the liminal glow between despair and hope, a fragile beginning poised on the edge of transformation. A low drizzle traced slick paths down the grime-streaked windows of Emily's clinic, casting a melancholic sheen over the quiet street corner. Inside, warm amber light spilled from frosted glass panes, a fragile beacon against the encroaching dusk of her unraveling world. The faint hum of old heating vents stirred the stillness as Emily knelt beside the shivering form of the injured dog nestled in a faded blanket. Her fingers, though soft and nurturing, moved with a tentative precision honed by years of caring for creatures lost in fear and pain. The dog's trembling slowed beneath her touch, amber eyes flickering with reluctant trust. Its collar, tattered and smeared with dirt, bore the worn imprint of loyalty, though the question of belonging hovered like a shadow too dense to pierce. Outside, the city's heart thumped relentless, lithe, distant wail of sirens, the sputter of a motorcycle's engine, footsteps reverberating against cold pavement. The muted glow of neon signs threw fractured reflections across rain-slicked sidewalks, painting the streets in bruised purples and angry reds, a reminder of a world both vibrant and perilous. Emily breathed steady but shallow, the weight of the gala's humiliation still smoldering beneath the surface of her skin. Yet within this modest sanctuary, amid the hum of life and the soft breath of recovery, she grasped a tender hold on purpose. The dog was a fragile pulse of responsibility and hope, a chance to conclude the night not in shame, but in quiet redemption. Her gaze flicked to the worn stethoscope slung around her neck, its familiar weight grounding her as she listened to the faint, irregular heartbeat beneath ragged fur. A whisper of determination cracked through her weariness. "You're going to be okay," she murmured, voice soft but unwavering, a promise declared to the frightened creature and, in truth, to herself. The clinic's old clock ticked insistently, a heartbeat counterpointing her racing thoughts. Outside, a sudden breeze shifted a pile of fallen leaves against the curb, their dry rustle a subtle accompaniment to the swelling tension inside. Her phone buzzed quietly on the cluttered counter. Emily glanced at the screen, an unidentified number. She hesitated, the sting of recent rejection fresh, uncertainty flickering across her features. The dog whimpered softly, sensing the tremor in her resolve. Emily's fingers closed over the device, uncertain but drawn to connection. Before she could answer, the clinic door swung open abruptly, rainwater spilling in alongside a messenger, a figure cloaked in shadow and urgency, the scent of tobacco and leather trailing behind. "Dr. Roberts?" A voice rasped, sharp but laced with an unexpected tenderness. Emily straightened, pulse quickening not from fear, but the raw electricity of unfolding possibility. "We need your help," the man continued, stepping into the warm light. Eyes shadowed yet earnest, he held a small package wrapped carefully, a presence both dangerous and vulnerable. Emily's heart tumbled in a fragile rhythm between caution and curiosity. The dog lifted its head, alert, nose twitching, as if sensing the fragile thread pulling her into something beyond the sterile borders of her clinic. Outside, the rain intensified, a wash of liquid urgency blurring the city's hard edges. Inside, the flickering fluorescent lights cast long shadows, the air thick with unsaid promises and uncharted danger. She took a breath-measured step into a world where love risked everything, where her heart would be tested beyond the limits of her quiet life. The night held its breath, poised on the edge of revelation and risk, as Emily and the stranger began a journey neither could have foreseen. The clinic's fluorescent lights hummed softly, a steady pulse against the growing tension in the room. Emily moved with practiced care, her hands gentle yet sure as she tended to the dog, its breathing slower now, eyes half-lidded with fragile trust. Yet herself felt a growing unrest, a shadow hovering at the edge of her sanctuary. The city beyond the clinic windows pulsed in syncopated rhythms, the distant roar of traffic blending with the muted honk of horns, the cadence of hurried footsteps on rain-slick sidewalks. Amid this cacophony lay a creeping unease, an invisible thread tugging at her awareness. Mysterious figures had begun appearing in the margins of her life, silhouettes in dark coats lingering near the clinic, shadows in the alleys she passed. The dog's increasingly alert demeanor mirrored her apprehension, a silent sentinel sensing danger where words faltered. But tonight, in the soft glow of her examination lamp, Emily chose to momentarily surrender to hope. She watched as the dog stirred, the faint flicker of life coaxed by her careen emblem of belonging amidst chaos. Yet, beneath that fragile hope, questions gnawed relentlessly. Whose companion was this creature? What dangers clung to its collar like lingering ghosts? Each answer seemed to bring forth another question, pushing Emily closer to an abyss she wasn't sure she could face. The clinic doorbell chimed softly, its delicate note sliced by the tension lingering in the room. Emily looked up, heart skipping against the steady rhythm of uncertainty. Antonio Russo stepped into the doorway, his presence commanding yet unassuming, a stark contrast to the ominous whispers shadowing her steps. His eyes met hers briefly, a flicker of something unreadable sparking between them. "I heard the dog needed help," he said, voice low, carrying weight beyond the words. The name alone sent ripples through the room, a delicate balance between threat and salvation. Emily's gaze flickered down to the dog's tired face, then back to Antonio's inscrutable expression. The conflicting currents of fear and gratitude swirled within her, an uncertain dance that threatened to unravel. "Thank you," she replied quietly, voice steady despite the swell of emotions rising beneath. Antonio moved closer, the faint scent of leather and roses trailing in his Wakea juxtaposition of danger and tenderness. His footsteps echoed softly on the worn floor, a rhythm echoing the uncertain beat of Emily's heart. As they stood together, the ambient light caught the shimmer of her stethoscopia, symbol of devotion mingled with vulnerability, and the glint of the dog's battered collar, worn but filled with unbroken loyalty. Yet in that fragile moment of connection, the shadows lurking around the clinic's edges shifted subtly, eyes watching, intentions masked. Emily's instincts tightened. The warmth of the interaction masked the brewing storm. The night thickened, weaving a tapestry of promise and menace, with hearts drawn toward impossible alliances and dangers lurking just beyond the glow. In the silent beat between breath and word, the fate of hearts and lives hung poised on the brink of change, of risk, of the irresistible pull of love where worlds collided. The night wrapped around the clinic, a velvet shroud pierced only by the flicker of street lamps casting long shadows over cracked sidewalks. Inside, Emily stood frozen near the reception desk, her chest rising and falling in uneven waves as she clutched the stray dog's battered collar, a fragile symbol of loyalty she had come to cherish. The wornness of its leather mirrored her own exhausted spirit, weathered, frayed, but stubbornly unyielding. Her mind reeled with the consequences of the evening. Antonio Russo's name whispered in hushed tones among the regular clients, the knowing glances that morphed into sharp departures. The whispered rumors, like poison, slithered through the community. The veterinarian who cared for a mafia kingpin, the danger looming just beyond the clinic's walls. The revelation had crashed into her life like a violent storm. Antonio's enigmatic figure she had tentatively welcomed into her clinic was the feared mafia boss whose shadow darkened the city's underbelly. A man whose loyalty to family was ruthless, whose reputation carved through the streets with brutal efficiency. The air hung thick with tension, each breath a struggle as Emily grappled with the duality of her feelings, fear and fascination, duty and affection. The stethoscope around her neck felt heavier, a weighted reminder of her profession and principles clashing against the chaotic reality encroaching. "Why did you bring him here?" Her voice barely a whisper, more to herself than to the silent walls. Buddy's soft whine brought her back to the present. The dog pressed against her legs, a living emblem of trust in an untrusting world. His eyes, wide and unyielding, held a plea and unspoken question of safety and belonging. Her gaze darted to the office window, where shadows flickered like ghosts under the watchful eyes of distant streetlights. The subtle shift in atmosphere, the unseen watchers lurking just beyond the veil of light, tightened the chokehold of anxiety. Emily's world tilted. The crisp edges of her carefully controlled life blurred into a kaleidoscope of uncertain alliances and fragile hopes. The room seemed smaller, the walls closing in with whispered threats wrapped in silk. She felt the cold sting of isolation, a woman caught between worlds that could never fully embrace her, a healer walking the fine line between salvation and destruction. Her thoughts spiraled, tangled in the thorny gift Antonio had unwittingly handed her, a connection entwined with peril and passion. The roses in the clinic's vase, their petals just beginning to wilt, mirrored her fragile state, beautiful, dangerous, destined to fade. In the quiet storm of her mind, a decision crystallized, not born from certainty, but necessity. She would not allow fear to cage her heart, nor guilt to shadow her hands. Love, she realized, demanded risk. But as the night deepened and shadows gathered, the protective boundaries of her small clinic faltered. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed faintly through the alley outside, a presence unseen yet palpably ominous. A sudden knock at the door shattered the fragile calm. Emily's breath caught, eyes wide with apprehension. "Who is it?" she called, voice steady but laced with unmasked tension. No answer. Only the cold silence pressing inward. The dog growled low and steady, the primal warning resonating through the still air. In that instant, the fragile veneer of security cracked, revealing the raw, tangled reality beneath a world where love and danger wove an inseparable tapestry. Emily's gaze hardened, the echo of her own heartbeat steadying a silent vow, to face whatever came with the courage of a healer and the fierce tenacity of one who refuses to be broken. The door creaked slowly open, casting a slit of shadow into the warmly lit room. And in that doorway stood Antonio Russo, no longer a visitor, but a force bound to her fate, the storm on the horizon. The rose petals on the floor crinkled beneath the weight of a new beginning, blood-red whispers against the cold tile. The clinic breathed with promise and peril, the fragile dance of love and danger poised at its zenith. And Emily stood at its heart, ready to step forward into the impossible. The clinic's once warm light sputtered weakly through rain-streaked windows, casting long, distorted shadows over the cold tile floor. Outside, the relentless drizzle blurred the neon glow of New York streets into smeared strokes of crimson and gold, mirroring the turmoil roiling within Emily's chest. The air inside her sanctuary felt thick, oppressive, a suffocating silence punctuated only by the distant wail of sirens and the soft pattering of rain. Emily sat slumped on the floor by the empty examination table, her lab coat soaked and stained, the fabric clinging to her like a second skin weighed down by the heavy burden of recent days. The worn stethoscope dangled lifelessly around her neck, its familiar metallic clink now sounding hollow in the vast emptiness that had become her world. Her gaze was fixated on the shattered remnants of her once thriving Clinica place, now scarred by whispers of Mafia ties, tainted reputations, and clients fleeing like shadows at dusk. The loyal faces that once filled her waiting room had dissolved into wary glances and cautious avoidance, each departure a knife twisting deeper into her fragile sense of self. In the corner, a single rose lay discarded, its petals darkened and curling inward, embodying the intoxicating blend of love and danger that had seeped into every crack of her life. The scent lingered faintly, a haunting reminder of promises made and broken. Emily's fingers trembled as they traced a faint ring on the polished flora mark left by the cup she once held with hope and vision. Now, even the smallest traces of her former strength seemed to fade like a dying ember. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming a relentless dirge against the roof, the sound melding with the distant hum of the restless city. The storm seemed to echo the turmoil inside Hera, relentless, crashing tide eroding the shores of hope. Her breath hitched, a fragile gasp swallowed by the looming void. The ache in her heart was raw and unyielding, a collision of love lost, dreams shattered, and self-worth eroded beneath the weight of suspicion and fear. Buddy, once a beacon of solace and unwavering loyalty, lay huddled beneath the examination table, his eyes reflecting the same quiet despair, yet still shimmering with an ember of trust that Emily struggled to grasp. Words dissolved into silence. When she spoke, her voice was a fragile whisper, threading through the shadows. "Where do I go from here?" Her question bounced off the walls, unanswered. In that moment, the room felt like a cage of shadows closing in, each breath a struggle, each heartbeat a reminder of unraveling threads. The stethoscope slipped from her neck with a soft clatter, its metallic ring a lonely echo in the suffocating stillness. Emily pressed her palms into the cold tiles, seeking footing on a ground that shifted beneath her with relentless uncertainty. Outside, the storm raged on, indifferent and overwhelming, a mirror to the tempest consuming her soul. The city's pulse continued unabated, the distant lights flickering through the haze like fleeting stars swallowed by relentless dawn. And within the walls of the silent clinic, a woman crumbled, adrift between despair and the faintest flicker of an uncertain dawn. The clinic was steeped in an unrelenting silence, the kind that hangs heavy and thick, seeping into every corner like a slow-moving shadow. The evening had surrendered to night, the once warm amber light now flickering faintly against the walls, casting long, wavering shapes that seemed to swallow the room whole. Emily sat on the floor near the examination table, her back to the window where the city lights twinkled dimly like distant stars behind a veil of smoke and rain. Her breath came in shallow whispers, the rhythm broken and uneven, as though the weight of each inhale pressed a deeper burden into her chest. The worn stethoscope slipped loosely from her neck, sliding down until it came to rest beside an empty paper cup, a silent emblem of care now stripped of purpose. Outside, the night rain tapped softly against the glass, the rhythm both soothing and mournful, an endless pulse that mimicked the desolation spreading through Emily's heart. The scent of wet asphalt and distant exhaust fumes crept in through a cracked window, mingling with the faint, metallic trace of stale antiseptic. Buddy curled up nearby, his once lively eyes now dull pools reflecting the dim light. He shivered faintly, as if sensing the erosion beneath Emily's composed facade. The stray collar around his neck was frayed and forgotten, emblematic of the fragile bonds stretched thin by fear and uncertainty. Her gaze drifted toward the worn rose pin crumpled in her palm, a symbol of love tinged with danger. Its petals wilted, colors faded. It lay folded like a quiet confession, a testament to hopes that bled into loneliness. The air felt heavy with echoes, whispered doubts circling in invisible spirals, the absence of warmth pressing cold and unyielding. Emily's fingers clenched around the fabric of her blouse, knuckles turning white as a silence deeper than the city's night wrapped around her. She swallowed, a sound barely more than a breath, the hollow ache encasing her words. "Is this all I am now?" No answer came but the soft rustle of distant traffic and the cold sigh of the wind through the broken streets. The room seemed to pulse with absence, a void where light, love, and belonging had once shimmered. The city's distant sirens curved into the night's stark melody, blending with the faint crackle of a dying lamp. The shadows stretched and recoiled, mocking mirrors to the fractures blossoming within her soul. Emily's face fell toward the floor, eyes closed to the outside world, retreating into the cavernous memories and fears that had become her prison. The rain intensified, drumming a relentless dirge on the glass, a staccato of loss and abandonment. In the quiet dark, she lay still, no longer fighting the tide of despair but sinking, swallowed by the void, the light in her eyes flickering precariously on the brink of extinction. A breath, a heartbeat, then only the whispering shadows remained. The small clinic was cloaked in the deep shadows of dusk, the faint shimmer of streetlights filtering through the rain-streaked windows, casting long, soft beams across the worn floor. Emily sat on the edge of the examination table, her hands loosely cradling the worn stethoscope that had long symbolized her dedication and hope. The metal felt cold, its weight suddenly heavy yet comforting, a reminder of the life she had vowed to protect even when she struggled to protect herself. Her gaze drifted to the wary eyes of the injured dog resting on a blanket nearby. Its battered collar, frayed but intact, caught the light for a fleeting moment, its quiet presence a fragile symbol of loyalty amid chaos. The dog stirred, offering a weak, trusting glance that stirred something deep within Emily's hardened heart. The rain tapped softly, a tender rhythm against the glass that mingled with the low pulse of the city beyond, a subtle soundtrack to a woman perched on the edge of surrender and awakening. The smell of wet concrete and roses lingering from a bouquet someone had left earlier in the day filled the air, a bittersweet fragrance of love and danger entwined. Emily's breath caught, a faint shudder tracing her spine as muted memories flickered across her mind, images of moments shared and lost, of courage and fear, of the man who had stepped into her life and shattered the fragile boundaries she had set. Her lips parted, voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet." The word, simple and quiet, carried an unspoken vow, to fight, to heal, to find a thread of light within the enclosing darkness. Her fingers tightened around the stethoscope, as if drawing strength from its familiar touch. Buddy's soft whine stirred her senses, the dog moving closer, offering solace without words, a living testament to fidelity when all else seemed uncertain. The flicker of hope was delicate, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable, a single rosebud blooming defiantly amid winter's chill. Emily rose slowly, the weight of her burdens pressing against every movement, yet beneath it all, a persistent pulse, a beating heart refusing to be silenced. The city's distant skyline flickered against the night as the clinic lights dimmed, the rising moon casting a gentle glow through the window. The promise of dawn lingered, fragile yet insistent. And in the quiet embrace of that fleeting moment, Emily made a silent choice, a commitment to step beyond fear, to embrace the uncertain path ahead, guided by the faint, unyielding light of love and purpose. The first light of dawn touched the city skyline, the muted orange glow spilling gently over the towering buildings like whispered promises of renewal. Emily stood by the clinic's wide bay window, its glass fogged faintly with the cool breath of morning. Outside, The streets of New York stirred with tentative life, the distant call of a street vendor, the rhythmic pounding of hurried footsteps, and the soft hum of autumn leaves rustling in the brisk wind. Within the quiet warmth of her clinic, a space once saturated with shadows of fear and doubt, a subtle shift had begun. The sterile white walls seemed softened by the soft golden hues flooding the room, the previous twilight gloom now replaced by a fragile luminescence like the first brushstrokes of a new canvas. Emily's worn stethoscope hung comfortably around her neck, the familiar weight grounding her amidst the swirling tides of uncertainty. She reached up, shyly tracing the cold metal with her fingertips, a quiet ritual anchoring her to the core of her purpose. On a low table nearby, the battered dog's collar lay draped, its frayed leather catching the early light weather but resilient, a silent testament to loyalty and belonging even when the world seemed indifferent. Her gaze drifted to a single crimson rose resting in a small ceramic vase, petals unfurling gently, delicate and determined. The faded fragrance was a poignant reminder of love's precarious existence amid Dangere, a symbol she now held close to her heart. A slow breath escaped, curling softly into the air. The ache of recent betrayals and loss lingered still, but beneath it, a flicker of something new fluttered, a whisper of courage, an awakening of resolve. Emily crossed to the doorway where the morning light spilled in, illuminating the well-worn flooring, the path of her journey etched into the wood beneath her feet. The discipline and empathy that had carried her through years of care flashed in her eyes, a lingering strength shadowed but unbroken. Her voice, barely more than a murmur, broke the silence. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The warmth of the words wove through the room, a gentle thread stitching the scattered pieces of hope back together. Behind her, the soft padding of Buddy's paws approached, his presence a living beacon amid the tentative dawn. Emily looked down, meeting the dog's trusting eyes, and felt a sudden swell of determination, a recognition that she was not alone, that bonds forged in adversity could withstand the harshest storms. Outside, the city exhaled, awash in hues of amber and rose as the sun rose higher, scattering the lingering darkness into distant shadows. The clinic's doors, once weighed down by unseen forces, stood ajar, welcoming, vulnerable, and filled with possibility. Emily inhaled deeply, the crisp air filling her with a quiet resolve. She took the first careful step forward, the promise of change whispering softly beneath the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, the fragile light of dawn held true, a beacon in the gathering day. And for the first time in a long while, hope felt real again. The night draped itself over New York City like a velvet curtain, soft amber streetlights flickering against the ever-moving tapestry of rain-slicked sidewalks and shadowed alleys. Emily stood beside Antonio in the dimly lit back room of her clinic, her breath visible in the cool air, mixing with the faint scent of roses crushed against cold concrete. The stethoscope hung heavily around her neck, a stark contrast to the sharp tension in her clenched fists. A sudden knock fractured the silencia signal that rippled through the air like a warning horn. Emily's heartbeat quickened, but her gaze was steady, eyes burning with newfound resolve. The door creaked open, revealing two figures cloaked in darkness, the promises of violence whispered in their silence. Antonio's hand slid discreetly beneath his tailored jacket, a gesture mirrored by Emily, who shifted protectively sideways, positioning herself firmly at his side. The lone stray dog they'd nursed together, now strong and alert, stood close, collar flashing like a beacon. "Stay calm," Antonio murmured, voice low, his protective aura radiating strength. Emily inhaled, the weight of past fears battling the surge of courage now coursing through her. She stepped forward when a harsh voice cracked the tension, demanding explanations, the threat palpable. But Emily's voice, though soft, cut sharp through the room's heavy silence. "This clinic protects life. It is not a place for threats or shadows." eyes locked in mutual recognition of strength and vulnerability, an unspoken alliance binding them. The air seemed to hold its breath as the hostile intent wavered beneath the blistering quiet. The stray dog's low growl rose, a primal barrier between menace and sanctuary. Antonio's calm shifted to decisive action, a warning unvoiced but clear as steel flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, the opponents retreated, their footsteps echoing into the night, leaving an almost surreal stillness in their wake. The door closed softly, sealing the threat outside but igniting a fierce glow within the sanctuary. Emily turned to Antonio, voice barely more than a whisper. "It's not just your world or mine. It's ours." He met her gaze with a nod, the ice around his heart thawing, replaced by respect and something deeper, fragile yet undeniable. The rain abated, revealing a sky littered with stars, cold pinpricks of distant light breaking through the urban gloom like tiny promises. Emily looked upward, feeling the first true sense of peace ripple through her, the whispered dawn after a night of storms. Her worn stethoscope clinked softly against her chest as she drew a steady breath, the fragile melody of hope threading through the moody silence. The clinic around them seemed to brighten, shadows retreating under the warm glow of resolute hearts. And in that golden, suspended moment, a quiet revelation bloomed that courage born of love could tip balance even against the darkest tides. The night awaited the next move, but Emily stood unshaken, a silent beacon poised amid the swirling storm. The morning sun cast a fiery glow over the New York skyline, painting the streets below in hues of gold and amber. Within the softly lit clinic, Emily stood resolute, her silhouette framed against the large window that overlooked the city's awakening pulse. The worn stethoscope rested firmly around her neck, a symbol of commitment, strength, and healing that no longer felt like a burden but a proud mantle. Her chestnut hair, once loosely tied, now caught the light with a gleam of steely determination, the tension of past turmoil replaced by an undeniable sense of clarity. Each breath she took was steady, infused with the quiet power of a woman reborn from the crucible of pain and courage. On the polished wooden counter lay the faded dog collar, now clean and mended, a small emblem of loyalty and belonging that resonated deeply with Emily's own journey. Next to it, a single crimson rose bloomed in a simple glass vase, its petals vibrant and rich with life, a poignant contrast to the dark shadows she had cast off. Antonio Russo entered the clinic, the powerful presence softened by the genuine warmth that now danced in his eyes. The once enigmatic Mafia boss who had stood as a figure of danger had been transformed through Emily's unwavering compassion into a man capable of love and change. Their eyes met, a silent exchange loaded with forgiveness and newfound understanding. Emily's voice, calm and unshakable, broke the moment. "We stand stronger together. This clinic, this city, it's our home, and we protect it." Antonio nodded, a rare softness touching his normally guarded expression. "With you by my side, there's nothing I wouldn't face." Outside, the city hummed with life, the cacophony of traffic and distant voices weaving into a harmonious symphony of hope. The clinic's large front doors opened wide, welcoming the morning light and the promise of renewal. Emily stepped forward with Antonio, their figures casting long shadows that merged and stretched into the street, a united front against the encroaching darkness. Their hands brushed briefly, a tactile vow of solidarity and trust. The camera lingered on the clinic's entrance as the scene shifted to silhouettes: Emily, Antonio, and the now-healed stray dog walking side by side through the pulsing heart of the city, where the first rays of dawn gilded the horizon in warm, hopeful light. The rose petals, caught in a gentle breeze, scattered softly across the pavement, symbolic whispers of love that could bloom amidst danger and despair. Emily's gaze lifted to the skyline, eyes reflecting the radiant glow of the rising sun and the quiet promise it held. Her voice, steady and filled with quiet conviction, this is where our story begins anew. And in the light of that fragile dawn, two worlds collided not with destruction, but with the fierce grace of hearts pledged to survive and love beyond the shadows. The city breathed around them alive with possibility, echoing the triumph of a love that risked everything and found its true dawn. The city's skyline blushed with dawn, soft hues of pink and gold spilling over the horizon like a gentle promise. Emily stood quietly in the small plaza outside her reopened clinic, her silhouette framed against the awakening city. The building behind her was no longer shrouded in shadows but bathed in warm, forgiving light, a testament to resilience and new beginnings. Her gaze lingered on the skyline, taking in the slow, graceful rise of the sun as if it mirrored her own journey from darkness into tentative hope. Her hands rested lightly on the weathered wood of the clinic's doorframe, fingers tracing familiar contours, symbols of healing, trust, and patience. The worn stethoscope she carried swung softly, a silent emblem of her unwavering dedication. In the gentle breeze, a stray dog trotted up to her, its collar shining faintly in the morning light, a collar that once symbolized loyalty and belonging, now a quiet testament to survival. Emily looked down, meeting the dog's trusting eyes, a gentle smile touching her lips. The scarred creature leaned into her touch, the small act echoing the emotional upheaval she had already begun to heal. Behind her, the city hummed softly, distant sirens and the rhythmic tap of footsteps blending into a symphony of renewal. The soft scent of roses from a nearby small gardenia, symbol of love intertwined with peril, wafted in the air, delicate and fleeting. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply, letting the cool morning air fill her lungs. It was the first calm she'd felt in what seemed like an eternity, a fragile, flickering flame of acceptance and gratitude. The chaos of her past, the near loss of her clinic, and the turbulent love that risked everything had all culminated into this quiet revelation. Her fingers tightened around the collar of the dog, a small but potent gesture of ownership, not of possession, but of her own reclaimed hope and strength. This moment was not just a pause. It was a quiet declaration that she was finally ready to move forward, not in fear, but with purpose. A faint smile curled her lips, and she looked upward toward the endless sky, where clouds drifted slowly, as if whispering tales of renewal. The city's dawn was a silent applause for her resiliency, a reminder that love, though risking everything when worlds collide, could also rebuild and redeem. She stepped away from the doorway, her posture steady, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The stray dog followed, its collar catching the sunlight, a silent marker of the voyage from shadow to light. Together, they moved along the empty streets, silhouettes against the rising sun, symbolizing hope reborn. In that tranquil moment, the city and her soul poised at the threshold of a new chapter. Emily felt a gentle acceptance settle within her, a simple, profound truth. Her story was not over, but merely beginning anew. As the last light of the day bled into twilight, Emily and Antonio found themselves atop the familiar hill overlooking the city, where a gentle breeze whispered through the leaves, stirring the wildflowers and carrying the scent of new beginnings. The stray dog, now reconciled and peaceful, rested at their feet, its collar shining softly against the fading sun, emblematic of the bond they had forged, a symbol of loyalty forged anew. Emily's gaze lingered on the horizon, her chestnut hair shimmering in the warm glow, eyes reflecting the silent acknowledgement of a journey completed and a new chapter quietly unfolding. She held Antonio's hand briefly, a gesture of gratitude and understanding, her heart finally unburdened, open to the delicate promise of love and redemption. Their silhouettes stood against the sprawling cityscape, a tapestry of hope woven into shadows, light, and the steady beat of their combined hearts. No words were needed. The silence spoke of acceptance, forgiveness, and the courage to embrace the uncertain future. The juxtaposition of their two worlds, the gritty streets of New York and the tender promises beneath the dying light, mirrored the complexity and beauty of their love, a testament to love's perilous beauty when love risks everything and survives. As the scene faded into the warm hues of the sunset, the camera lingered on the gentle rise and fall of Emily's chest, her face serene, eyes bright with the quiet victory of a woman who had weathered storms and emerged whole. The stray dog shifted, pressing closer as if sensing the sacredness of that silent guardian of their fragile hope. The wide shot pulled back, capturing the figures against the majestic city, symbols of resilience and transformation, silhouettes against the blaze of a new dawn. The soft, lingering light cast a halo around their peaceful figures, the perfect stillness of an ending and a beginning intertwined. In that moment, time seemed to pause, an eternal testament to the power of love, the strength of forgiveness, and the promise of a future born from the ashes of the past. The city whispered its lullaby, a gentle reminder that even amid chaos and danger, love could find a way to bloom in the light of hope. The city's skyline was bathed in a soft, golden glow as the day reached its tender close. Emily and Antonio, walking side by side, shared a quiet companionship, their silhouettes outlined against the sprawling, luminous horizon of New York. The stray dog, now fully reconciled, trotted happily between them, collar shimmering with a renewed loyalty, a small emblem of healing and acceptance. The gentle evening air carried a faint scent of roses, symbolic of love, peril, and renewal, drifting softly around their feet, as if nature herself acknowledged the fragile peace now settled over their lives. Emily's hand lingered on Antonio's arm, a sure and steady gesture that spoke of trust finally fully restored. They moved in harmony, the city lights flickering dimly beneath a sky streaked with violet and amber. Time seemed suspended, the noise of the bustling streets fading into a distant, inaudible hum. In that moment, a profound silence enveloped the man, echo of the tumultuous journey they had traversed and the serenity they had fought to reclaim. The streets blurred as the camera pulled back, capturing their figures, two souls intertwined amidst the sprawling metropolis, silhouettes against a canvas of hope, resilience, and new beginnings. The stray dog, tail wagging gently, pressed closely, a living symbol of loyalty and belonging. Above, the first stars flickered shyly into existence, tiny beacons whispering promises of a future where love and courage could coexist. The city, vast and relentless in its rhythm, now seemed to hold its breath, bearing witness to the quiet victory of hearts that dared to love against all odds. The scene lingered on this peaceful tableau, a testament to the truth that ultimately, love's greatest strength was kindness, forgiveness, and the unyielding hope for tomorrow. The gentle rise and fall of Emily's breath, the soft patting of paws, and the warm glow of sunset painted a cinematic pause, inviting viewers into a quiet reflection on a story that proved that even in chaos, peace could be found if only you dared to seek it. What would you do if your kindness led you to the Mafia? Share your thoughts below.